Hi everyone, this is Meredith Root, and welcome to the Afternoon Snack Podcast, brought to you by Tactic Nutrition.
Hi, I'm Alex Parker, owner of Tactic Nutrition, former lawyer, CrossFit Games athlete, turned health and fitness geek.
I'm also into health and nutrition, a more recent CrossFit Games athlete, co-owner of Tactic Nutrition, and former engineer. We are here to have fun, engaging conversation about some of our favorite topics, including nutrition, health, coaching, motivation, and of course, CrossFit.
Our goal is to give you something to think and talk about and hopefully make you laugh along the way.
Glad you got that yawn out of the way before I started recording.
Close one.
I was like, are you ready? She's like, yep. I was like, okay, that's like the opposite of being ready for a podcast.
It snuck up on me.
Making mouth noises. Yeah. Here we are. Hey, Alex. Why do you hate that so much?
I don't know. It seems so silly that we spent the whole day together and then you're like, hey.
Yeah, but we didn't record a podcast.
I guess.
And it's a good way. It's like people know like that the talkative one is not Alex. Generally. You get going on some topics.
Yeah, I do get going.
Yeah. So what's good? What's the update? We just finished up with the final weekend of you're yawning again. Is this do I bore you this much? Are you this bored with me?
No. It doesn't matter. Something could be really exciting and I'll still yawn.
Well, it's kind of like who is it? Jen Smith, who always yawns before her. Like she's like,
oh yeah,
just about to start a workout and she'll just start yawning.
Yeah, it's to get extra oxygen in. I think
it's like definitely a parasympathetic sort of response.
The worst is when I'm like on a call and I need to yawn and I have to do one of those like closed mouth yawns.
Oh, and then like your eyes start twitching and watering. And then sometimes you're like, I got this. I'm going to make it all the way through the yawn without doing anything weird. And then like your mouth just snaps open and you kind of bark. Yeah, that's the worst.
I mean, I can't say that's what happens with me, but
it's definitely happened. It's actually like, okay, I don't know. You didn't work as long as I did, but sometimes we would have like lunch meetings. Because you're not allowed to actually enjoy your lunch at work. You have to have stupid meetings. So we would be in a lunch meeting and like, I mean, it's an inevitability that even as an adult, sometimes you like kind of choke on your food or you're drinking something and it goes the wrong.
It happens to everybody.
And so the worst is when you're in like a big departmental lunch meeting that they've catered and there's somebody like some PhDs up there talking about whatever.
Something super boring.
And you take a drink of your water, your Diet Coke or whatever, and it's like, like if you're by yourself, you just cough that out.
Yeah.
Like you have a coughing fit for like 15 to 20 seconds and then you're good to go. But in a meeting or in a group setting, you're just kind of left there to just like suffer in silence.
And it takes like the whole, like, it doesn't go away.
No, but like you go through like sort of stages of kind of grief. You're like, okay, I can't have a coughing fit that will draw far too much attention. So instead you're just going to kind of like flinch and then like sit there and your eyes are watering and maybe you'll give it like a
you do like little coughs.
Yeah. But the worst is like when it's really like it's down there and you're kind of like low-key choking a little bit. You try to hold that in. And then it's like actually like the act of holding it in is drawing far more attention than if you would have just had a little coughing fit. Yeah. That's the worst. I don't miss those days at all. But anyways, so back to what I was saying, we've just wrapped up semifinals. So the final weekend of semifinal for CrossFit Games competition was this past weekend. And so we had...
Not including the last chance qualifier.
No, yeah, but that's a different stage. So you have semifinals and then a weekend off and then last chance qualifier.
And for people who don't know, and who aren't familiar with the CrossFit schedule, the semifinals is like the last stage to qualify for the CrossFit Games. So the top 5 from each semifinal, and I think there's like 8 or
Well, there's more. Well, and also it's not
no,
top
there's like
five
12.
every.
It's not top 5 everywhere,
Yeah.
but anyways, you have to come like top 1 or 3 or 5.
Yeah.
It's 5 in North America to get to go to the CrossFit Games. So it's kind of like it's like the old it's the regionals replacement.
Yes.
So next up is the CrossFit Games.
And they really did, like, the in-person events looked very, like,
regionals-esque.
regionals-esque.
Yeah.
It was like regionals with a different color scheme.
Yeah.
Which is kind of neat. And then there was obviously, I think 50% of the events were online. So we had, like, this weekend was West Coast Classic, which was in person in Las Vegas. And then at the same time, there was Atlas Games, which is where that event was supposed to be in Montreal. And that's where most of the Canadians, or all of the Canadians, got seated into that event. And then I think the Asian one was this weekend, but I didn't keep up with that one as much. No. So yeah, anyways, we were withholding our opinions on it, I think, until it wrapped up. So I'm kind of curious, Alex, what do you think of this new system? What went well? What didn't go well? What would you like to see in the future? And if you have any specific thoughts on events or athletes.
Okay, well, I'll speak on behalf of myself. Although I think you have a lot of the same opinions because we've discussed. But I thought that the athletes who ended up punching their ticket to the games were the right ones. However, I don't necessarily think I agree with the way that they seeded athletes into events. I didn't think that it was fair. Some events, from my perspective, seemed more stacked. Like the field was a little bit deeper. So there were a lot more people who were vying for those like last chance qualifier spots, or even like the 4th and 5th spot that were kind of like in the mix.
Yeah.
Like higher caliber athletes, I should say. And it's tough to know for sure because all of the events had different workouts. So, I mean, this is just what I think. And based on what I know about the athletes who are seeded into events, like West Coast Classic was extremely competitive in my opinion. And then on top of everything, like, so now with CrossFit, there's hubs of athletes, which I think is awesome. It's going to help make people better. And if I were doing this competitively, I would try to be in a hub because your training environment is ideal. But when you have like 3 or 4 athletes all competing together who are from the same hub and are also on top of that local, that seems like an unfair advantage to me.
Yeah.
So like, not that they wouldn't have qualified because they're all extremely like great athletes, like Carrie Pierce,
Danielle Brandon,
Bethany Shadburn all trained together, are all living in Las Vegas, and they came 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's probably a coincidence, but it's also like, I mean, they also did well in the ruck run, which was in like 105-degree weather. And where other people who maybe weren't as used to the weather were having issues with like heat, exhaustion, and other things. Yeah. And just like, having it impact their performance. And when you're not used to living in that heat or in that climate, it can have a disadvantage. So it's like there's a little bit of unfairness there, I think. But I don't know if that's avoidable. I don't. There's always going to be like questions being asked about the seasons, the way the season layout is. Notable things worth mentioning, obviously, like I would love to talk about the teenagers, especially the ones at Granite Games who excelled. I don't know how many times the announcers told us that they were teenagers. It had to be upwards of 350 times at least. Like it was driving me. And she's only 17. Yeah. We know. These youngsters really showing these other athletes, age is just a number. Well, let me tell you age is not just a number. Mallory O'Brien isn't going to be saying age is just a number when she's 30 and she has bad knees.
Yeah.
Like, age is not just a number. I'm going to just say one thing. or one little blurb. It is remarkable in some sense that these 17-year-olds are doing as well as they can. But if you actually think about it, let's take Emma Carey and Mallory O'Brien as examples. And I'm not taking away their accomplishments by saying this. I'm just putting some things in perspective here. They have been doing CrossFit about as long as everybody else on the field. Maybe not, they don't have the exact experience as, 6 times games athlete, Alessandra Pacelli. However, they've been training for just as long, and arguably in a better training scenario. They understand, there's been so much. They're 17. That is a huge advantage. That's actually a huge advantage from a hormonal standpoint, and just from the fact that they're younger and their joints aren't
Well, yeah, from a from a hormonal perspective, I'll just interject here.
Yeah, please.
When you look at testosterone levels for females, there's a serious peak that occurs around ages 16, 17, 18. Testosterone levels, they're just higher for a lot of, obviously, ranges for females, it's large. So you can't say 100%, a 17-year-old has higher testosterone levels, but it's more likely that they do than when you compare a 25, 26, 30-year-old.
Yeah.
They're more likely to be in a hormonally advantageous state. So when you take an athlete who is in that state and you consider the fact that they have 7 years of training age under their belt at the age of 17, it doesn't get much more optimal than that, because you're also dealing with very low life stress.
Yeah, think about what life was like when you were 17. The most stressful aspect of life at 17 is socialization issues, the social aspects.
Oh, high school drama.
High school drama. These kids, they don't go to high school. They're homeschooled, which we all know what homeschool means. And they said it themselves, because I watched them on an interview. They do school on their rest days.
Yeah.
Which means that's 2 days a week they do school. I'm like, okay, really? That's nothing.
Yeah.
On top of that, your parents are cooking your meals for you. You don't have to worry about money because your parents pay for everything. And if you have sponsorships, that means nothing to you. It's just it probably goes into your parents' bank accounts.
Yeah.
You have no clue of what needs to be done in life. You're not worried about. Clearly these kids at this point aren't even worried about the future, where when you're 22, yeah, there's a little bit of life stress going on.
It's what am I going to do in
you're either
3 to
living
5
in your
years?
parents' basement, which is stressful because you're I'm living in my parents' basement, or I hope you're stressed out about that.
Yeah.
Or you're living on your own or with somebody, and you have to pay rent. You have to pay for food. You have to cook.
Yeah.
You have sponsorship requirements, all of this stuff. These kids are living the dream.
Yeah.
That is such an advantage.
Yeah, and it's and there are teenage athletes in every sport who are living in similar situations, and that's part of the reason why some sports are sort of shifting to a younger demographic. Obviously gymnastics and ice skating, those sports just favor a younger athlete for a lot of reasons. But even you look at the way that Tiger Woods was brought up, all of that was happening for him at that same age. And it's, the difference is he was going to high school. And if you watch that documentary, it's he was kind of living 2 lives. But as far as his athletic endeavors, everything was taken care of. All he needed to do was focus on golf. And that's probably part of the reason why he ended up being so good.
Mm-hmm.
But the obvious difference, in my opinion, and I don't want to turn this into the topic of the podcast, but since we're on the topic, and we've talked about this before.
I'm sure it's interesting because people are probably sitting there watching semifinals wondering, how are these 17-year-olds dominating?
Yeah. And imagine having the brain of a 17. There's no fear. There's no concern.
You have nothing to lose.
Yeah. But anyways, Tiger Woods, he did go to high school. He got into Stanford. He played golf at Stanford, and then he went on to the PGA Tour, which is even before Tiger Woods, golf was a fairly lucrative sport if you're very good. So it's as far as like, where do I want my career to go? That's a good career choice. And if you're good at golf, that's a good choice. I think that, my concern with this sport, and it's been my concern because we've talked about it, like, I think that people are assuming, like, yeah, no, I know there's no money in it, but there's gonna be. Like, that's a big assumption. It's a big assumption to assume that it's going to become lucrative. Because even at the top level, even when you look at Matt Fraser, even when you look at Tia, even when you look at the athletes that have Nike endorsements, their Nike endorsements are like chump change compared to the Nike endorsements in golf, in basketball, in football, and literally other sport, like any other sport. So you can't say like, oh, there's money in the sport, because there simply is not.
And sorry to say, but not only to make money in the sport with endorsements, you have to not only be really good at the sport, but you also have to look the part.
Yeah.
And if you're missing that part, you're going to struggle. You are. Like, it's like we've seen it. It's just the way it is, because this sport exists on social media.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist in its own right.
There are people who are on social media who, like, and I've heard this from people who we know, like, they think that they've gone to the games, but they haven't.
Mm-hmm.
Those people exist.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is perception and what you look like, and what kind of content you're putting on social media, how much content you're putting on. Like, it goes so far beyond the sport, and that's, that's just part of the game, and that people have to understand. But yeah, I don't know. I think, I don't know if anybody else was getting tired of the announcers just generally talking about things that didn't make any sense. But on top of that, like, just hearing, oh, this girl is only 17, or even Dallin Pepper, he's only 19. Well, like, look at the dude.
Yeah. Well, the thing that bugged me about that is they went on the entire Granite Games weekend. Like, the only thing they talked about was Mal O'Brien and Emma Carey and their age. And I think they made a comment about Dallin Pepper one time.
Yeah.
They mentioned his age once, and then they were done talking about it. And I'm like, really? Like, what, just because he's a guy, you're not going to, like...
It didn't really make sense to me. The commentating.
Yeah.
At all. It didn't make any sense. Even, like, Matt Fraser was just... I don't want to be super negative here, but I don't know.
He should I don't know that commentating is going to be his future.
Like, they need to bring people on who actually are educated in that, like, have experience. I don't know.
Well, I do think I think this. And first of all, before we get off the topic of Mal O'Brien,
yes,
with all of that said, she was, like, very enjoyable to watch.
Absolutely.
It's like, just absolutely.
But she would have been enjoyable even if I didn't know she was 17.
I know. Like, she just made those other girls look like they weren't even trying.
I loved every time the announcers, she would go out like a bat out of hell. And every single time, I don't know if this is a smart move on her behalf. Like,
just let her do her thing.
Like, stop, and just, like, if you can't see, like, she's done this every time. She's just that fit.
Stop projecting your lack of fitness onto her, because she's going to do it.
She was really, wow.
I was just especially blown away.
I mean, Emma Carey should take some credit as well, because she was right there with her.
Yeah. Like, it was very entertaining to watch. The problem was that they would not stop talking. Like, just, they're athletes. Like, they're female athletes, and let's leave it alone. Yeah. Let's leave it at that.
You can talk all day long about everything that they're doing without mentioning that they're 17.
Yeah.
60 million times.
What I was going to say though is, and this is what I hope, because I do hope that this sport grows. And I think a lot of things need to happen, like, in order for that to happen. But inevitably, as it grows and they get onto, like, bigger broadcasts, I mean, like, in 2018 they were on with CBS, and, like, they had some actual CBS sports broadcasters on the games broadcast. And that's, if they start moving in that direction, that's going to happen again. And CBS is going to take a hard look at the broadcast that CrossFit's putting out, and they're going to be like, no, like, you have to do better, or we're not picking that up. So either they're going to have to come up with some more, I guess, well thought out broadcasting, or it's likely that CBS or ESPN or whoever, wherever they end up, is just going to be like, yeah, we got the broadcast.
Well, what seems to be happening is they're bringing out these, like, they bring on athletes, which I think is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like they're bringing athletes on. I'm like, have you vetted these athletes? Do they even know what's going on in this? Like, bring on Masters athletes to talk about like the semifinals. It doesn't make sense. Like, they don't know the athletes. Like, bring on somebody who knows the athletes or is willing to actually do the research on these athletes and state interesting facts.
I want to see.
It's not that hard. Everything is on social media.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just felt like it was just a lot of focus on like the person who was winning, and then just not even a lot of talk about anything else. It was just,
yeah.
Not that I could do a better job. I mean,
it's hard. I would have a hard time like remembering and keeping up. But even like, with Brianna, she's such an interesting person.
Brianna Wallen.
Yeah.
She came 10th at West Coast Classic.
Yeah, she's been around forever. Like, she was on Titan Games. Like, she owns a gym. She also has a full-time job. Like, she's so interesting. There's so much to talk about there. And it was the only thing they had was like, oh, she used to cheerlead.
I think they did say she was on Titan Games with
Danny Spiegel.
But of course they only know.
Yeah, it's just it's like there's room for improvement.
Yes,
and I think like you have to give them the benefit of the doubt because we've been without in-person competition. So I'm like, I think everybody just needs to kind of like dust themselves off and maybe knock the rust off a little bit.
Yeah, and maybe we can move the sport out of it being a popularity contest.
Yeah, which I think would be
like, I'm just, you know what? I'm not even apologetic about the things that I say anymore. It's just the way it is. And it's the way it's always been. And if you're sitting here and you don't know that, welcome. Like,
well, okay, here's a prime example, right?
It's just, this is the sport. Like, it's really disappointing.
When so they were broadcasting the Ruck Run, and they had Chris Henshaw on the broadcast, which was painful for a lot of reasons. But there were two things that really bothered me. The first one is they showed this this girl, and she was a competitor, and I think she's in the military or she's a firefighter or something. She was doing really well at the beginning. And instead of highlighting the fact like this girl's doing really well, she's beating a lot of the men, they said something about like, oh, she's kind of pulling a Sam Briggs. Like, they immediately went to talking about Sam Briggs. And it's like, this woman is her own person. Like, can we not talk about her? Like, part of the reason why new talent has such a hard time coming up in the sport is you won't stop talking about the people that are becoming like, not that Sam's irrelevant. She's not, but like, she's not in it anymore. Like, not like she used to be.
She's not in this competition, so she shouldn't be talked about.
And that brings me to my second point. And the number of times that Chris Henshaw talked about Tia-Clair Toomey during the broadcast of the West Coast Classic, which was on the other side of the country from where Tia was in that moment. Like, she's not competing. Just
because nobody knows about these other athletes, which makes it hard for these other athletes to get sponsorships because they're not getting any coverage. Because no one knows who they are.
Even when they're on TV and they're winning, Chris Henshaw's talking about Tia.
Yep.
It just it made my head want to just blow off.
Or they just talk about the men.
Well, yeah, because they know more about the men.
It's so disappointing. It just is.
Yeah.
Just gonna say it.
But as far as the competition goes, like what did you think of? So the in-person competitions we had, Mid-Atlantic, we had the one in Australia, we had West Coast Classic, Granite Games. Mm-hmm. Were there any more in person?
Those are the ones that I kept up with.
I feel like I'm missing one, but
was Brazil?
No, that was online. Yeah, it was. All the Europeans was online. South America was online. Australia was in person, and then some of the North American ones were.
Yeah, I think that might be it.
Yeah. I thought the online events went well, as far as like how to organize those, because they said as soon as an event shifts to online, CrossFit takes over the programming. I thought the programming was really good for the online events, especially compared to like quarterfinals were a little bit biased. I'm glad that they made all of the regions do the same workouts. They had a good system for like managing the schedule. And like turnaround time on scoring and video review was really quick. There was that like the snafu with the was it Lowlands or German
where they announced the top 5
and then
on all social media platforms, and then revoked basically the unofficial / but it did seem very official invitation to the 5th place spot, who ended up going to Sam Briggs because she had her judge settling her bar in between rounds during Gretel, which was not stated in the rules that nobody could touch her bar, although in the other events it was clearly and explicitly stated that nobody could alter or touch the equipment during the workout. So but to be clear, it was not stated in Gretel. And then CrossFit Games said, after they had revoked her invitation, saying that, this wasn't allowed, and gave her a penalty, which dropped her out of the top 5, said it should be assumed that there should be no touching of equipment by a judge or a coach.
Because there's a precedent set.
Because there's a precedent set. But what was bothersome for me is that CrossFit Games should have owned the fact that they made a mistake by not putting it in every single workout that involved equipment, and only in 3, which leads me to believe that if it's stated in other things, and if it's not stated in another, then that would mean that it is allowed. If it weren't stated in any of them, then you could assume you could argue that there could be an assumption.
Yeah.
But not if it was their fault, in my opinion. That was on CrossFit.
Yeah, I think there were a number of mistakes made. I think they probably legitimately made a mistake not printing it in the rules. That was probably an error and an omission. And then I think, like, just watching that video, I think that the judge made the decision to do that without consulting the athlete. So I think that was an accident on the judge's part. And then
it's too bad because I don't think it actually helped him that much. Like, the bar was pretty much settled by the time he put his hand on it.
Yeah. And because I've seen bar settling, and that was like not bar settling. But
Felt really
then
bad for her.
I think the third mistake is I always some amount of acknowledgement, even if it's like, even if they don't believe that they made a mistake, you can at least, we are regretfully in this situation where we have to do this. Like,
they should at least point out the fact that they should not have announced it on their social media platforms. At the very least.
But like, in defense of CrossFit, because I will defend them. I think there was so much to do this year with the events pivoting online. They are trying really hard. It's a small team. I think that overall it went really well. There was obviously, this is kind of the black mark on it. And it was just an error.
Overall, it seemed very fair.
Yeah.
Overall, I have my criticisms, but overall, I thought the athletes who qualified are the ones who should have gone.
Yeah. They even penalized Katrin for her step over burpees.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, they did that. They were really quick on the penalties. Like when you think about what that actually takes to do, that's pretty impressive, because you have like submission windows, and then like the leaderboard has to be updated before the next window starts. Like, when you actually think logistically about what it takes to do that kind of turnaround, it's pretty impressive.
I enjoyed watching. I especially enjoyed. I really liked watching Granite Games because of Mallory O'Brien.
Yeah, and
I like seeing the bubble athletes. Like, it was cool to kind of see Christy Aramo try to kind of fight back. I like watching. Obviously, I'm a fan of CrossFit, and then I thought West Coast Classic was really entertaining.
Yeah,
like there was some shuffling going on. Just some old OG CrossFitters in there, like Lauren Fisher, Reagan Huckabee, like these girls that like I was competing with in 2015. I'm like, dang, good for you guys.
I thought even as entertaining as like the top was, I found like kind of the midfield to be really entertaining.
And we had some friends out there.
Yeah.
Some people we knew personally, and it was really fun to watch that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
And also it was cool how they repeated events. Like events
I love
that
that.
we've done at regionals or that we've tested for the games.
Well, when they made that announcement last year that West Coast Classic was going to be all repeat events, when it was in Del Mar before it was canceled, I was like, oh, that's going to be like, that's really fun because it's just good old classic CrossFit. Like,
everybody loves Dave's programming.
Yeah. In regionals, you get to pick and choose the best of regionals. I think that they might have made it a little bit harder than it needed to be. That like the programming was pretty beefy.
And they had 7 like significant events there.
Yeah, but it was I thought overall West Coast was probably the most well-rounded program of all of the like the in-person events. And I think like going back to your
I liked how there wasn't a 1 rep max.
Yeah, and I don't think there shouldn't be a 1 rep max.
There hasn't been a 1 rep max in like an event outside of the actual games in so long.
Yeah.
It's just, but I guess it was kind of cool to watch at MAC, watching like, hey, who of the guys is going to hit 300?
Yeah.
Who of the girls is going to hit over 200?
I do think with only like 6 or 7 events though, a 1 rep max will always skew the results.
Oh man, can we talk about just for a second Haley Adams hitting 185?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
That was I cheer for Haley. She's such a beauty.
Yeah, it's like just you can tell like I believe that there are a lot of people who do this sport who don't actually enjoy it, and you can see it on their face. You can see it when they're moving around. Like they do it because they've done it for a long time, and maybe it's the way that they make money. You can like all you have to do is watch Haley. Like she loves this, and like she's not too good to celebrate a PR when she hits. Well, I don't know how she hit that.
I know
it's amazing, but like
just she's such a fighter. Like,
yeah,
she's so gritty.
Yeah, that was and she doesn't take herself too seriously, which is to be as good as she is. A lot of people would.
I haven't talked to her in person in a very long time, but I remember when she was, man, it was like four years ago. She was training with us.
Oh, for regionals.
And we were doing like 50-pound thrusters in a workout, and she was struggling. And there was like, it wasn't like, okay, I'm going to just drop down the weight. She was like, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And she was like a little noodle back then.
Yeah.
Very strong.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, if this girl doesn't get injured, she's going to be good. And like, I mean,
look at her now.
I mean, just from like her, just she's told to do something and she will do it.
And she just like, I don't think people understand.
No complaints.
No. And I don't think people understand how fit she is, because like, I think unless you saw Haley when she was like 15, 16, 17, when like there was she's still on the weaker side for an athlete. Back then she was like really not strong, but you just saw her get through some workouts that in a way that made no sense at all. And I think you saw that when you were in Raleigh, and it was like, oh yeah, she's got something going there. That's going to be good.
Yeah. She's one of my favorite athletes to watch.
Yeah.
And I just like really like Tasia and like
that whole
team.
dynamic.
They just seem to be really having a great time.
Yeah. The Mayhem Crew's fun. Yeah. What I was going to say about the seeding, to go back to that topic for a second, like you have to remember that like semifinals are replacing regionals. And so regionals are regional. They would put two, they would actually put 2 regions together into like a super regional. But you're competing.
Like, for example, when we competed at regionals last, it was West North America, I think.
West region. It was the West region.
And it was California, BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan.
It was like Southern California, Northern California, Northwest US.
Yeah,
and
like
then
Oregon,
Western
Washington,
Canada.
and then Western Canada. So it was like pretty big region.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how they grouped people together.
And then in the Atlantic, you have the Southeast and the Mid-Atlantic. And like the East, you have the Central East and the Northeast. Like that kind of. So you're competing in or around the area in which you live, like geographically. The climates is probably like most of them are inside, so you don't really have to worry about the climate.
You kind of know who you're going to be competing against.
Yeah. Like the elevation is predictable. And I thought, we were talking to Meg Reardon earlier, and she made a good point about Las Vegas. Everybody forgets that Vegas is at elevation. You are dealing with some altitude there. And so there's the rule this year where if you live in a state in which there's a semifinal event, you're automatically seeded into that event. I don't think that's super important unless it's an altitude, it's an elevation. So Las Vegas, like you had the three Vegas girls who are acclimated to elevation, who are competing at elevation, and
well,
then
they're also acclimated to the fact that it's dry as
yeah, it's very dry,
desert. It's
and
the desert.
like they did an outdoor event. But even without that, I think she made a good point about the altitude. Like you're immediately disadvantaging athletes that are coming from sea level.
Yeah.
And so I think like if you want to keep an event in Vegas, I think that's fine. But the way that I think it should be seeded is the way that like the NCAA basketball tournament is seeded. And so you have all of the teams that are competing, and they're all seeded 1 through 16. We don't need to seed athletes because we have a seeding process already, and that's quarterfinals. Everyone comes out with a rank. And so, people might say, oh, well, it's unfair if I have to go to an event that's across the country. And it's like, well, tough luck. Like, that's the sport. It happens to basketball teams all the time. Like, there's an NCAA location in North Carolina, but very frequently Duke or UNC or NC State will be competing in like Minneapolis, or they'll be competing on the West, like because that's just how the seeding works. And so if you do that, now you're very likely going to split up a group of athletes who have an advantage at elevation. If it so happens that they are all seated in that, that venue, then that just so happens. But you're not immediately giving them an advantage by allowing them, to be one of, the only, a small handful of athletes there who are familiar with the conditions.
Do you think it's an advantage with those three? And we're just using them as an example. I mean, the same thing was happening in other places.
Yeah.
But those three being at the same competition together besides the climate,
I think there's a level of familiarity. Like it's the safety blanket scenario.
Well, like you've been training together. You kind of know where you stack up next to Carrie. Like let's take Bethany.
Yeah.
You know where you stack up next to Carrie. Like going out with Carrie, knowing where you're at, where you've been at as you've practiced the events. Like I remember that in at regionals in 2018, competing against you and Jordan.
Yeah.
Like we warmed up together. We talked about events together.
Yeah, I think what's going on there is
hung out together. Like it makes a difference.
Yeah, you're providing a more ideal scenario for those athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Not intentionally, but it just is the way that it works out.
Yeah.
The coach gets to stay there instead of having to have proxy coaches go elsewhere.
Yeah.
Like I kind of get it, but I think that there's like the disadvantage that it confers to other athletes.
Yeah, it's not so much. I think those three would have qualified anywhere.
100%.
Because they are all like really good, like above and beyond. They obviously in that competition were just like be above and beyond everybody. But I think you're right. It is a disadvantage more to the others.
Yes.
Than it is to.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll see how that changes, if it changes. But again, like what's exciting about this is it's the first year of this format. And you remember when sanctionals rolled out in 2019, like what a shit show. And so like it's nice to see this is a much more buttoned up version of that. Like it feels like a step towards back towards regionals, but also involving these private events, which I think is good. I think that's what needs to happen. So it'll be really interesting to see, and I'm excited to see what happens even next year. Like what do we learn this year that we can take forward into next year to make things even better, even more fair, to to make the competition more fun to watch. Because I think that CrossFit they're very open to changing, and they're very open to modifying and, having new iterations of kind of the same competition format, but just making small tweaks.
So for the listeners, sanctionals basically was just individually owned and run competitions. So for example, Wadapalooza Granite Games. They're still like owned, but there's not that there was no CrossFit oversight. Like Dubai. What's going to be really interesting. And so they could decide who competed. They could hold a qualifier if they wanted. They could make the open the qualifier, or they could just randomly invite people based on their
maybe the
their standards, which like clearly there weren't any.
Maybe the event organizer also owns an athlete management company, so they invite all of their managed athletes.
Yeah. So
not saying that happened.
It, again, goes back to my argument. It's more support for the fact that it's just like CrossFit was becoming, and I'm glad they're moving away from that just a popularity contest. Like, oh, you have 300,000 followers on Instagram and you're kind of good at CrossFit. Can you come to our competition, please? Because like, people are going to see that it's going to grow the competition. Yeah. People want to see Katrin compete. People want to see even Lauren Fisher compete. All of these people who are just like, they have this huge following.
But you take somebody like...
But they didn't do the qualifier.
Yeah. So a really, really prime example of this, and I think it has had unfortunate consequences for this one particular athlete, is Caroline Riesen-Thibault versus someone like Katrin. So you take Caroline, who's been to the games, 6 times?
I think she was there in 2015 for sure, because I was there. Yeah. And she's been there ever since.
Yeah. So she's
at least 5 or 6.
She's one of the longest standing games athletes that shows up in the field every year. She's done...
And does well.
Yeah. She's placed really well. She's been on like Team Canada back when the Invitational was a thing. Like she's been around. But when the sanctionals format rolled out, Carol Ann, because she doesn't have a huge following, she speaks French. She doesn't speak her English is much better than it used to be. But she's not going to be as marketable as someone like Katrin, and she also doesn't hold herself out like Katrin.
I think that's the key.
So you have Carol Ann, who's just breaking her back in these qualifiers. She
also doesn't have a coach who's popular in CrossFit.
Yeah, who has connections. Yeah. So she's doing all of these qualifiers for all of these events, and she's getting in. And then you have, you have Katrin and that whole crew who's just getting invited. So they get to skip the qualifiers. So just think for a second what it does to an athlete's season to have to just continue to do qualifier after qualifier after qualifier just to do an event. And like, she had to pull out this year of Atlas Games because her knee is so banged up. So it's hard for me to not, think back and be like, well, what if Carol Ann had gotten the same treatment that Katrin did? Because they've been to the games pretty much the same number of times. And I think I'm glad. I think that time is over.
Well, remember it was Cape Town, the event?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry if I'm throwing events under the bus. I'm sure like they don't listen to us, but they specifically said you have to do the qualifier to go to our event.
Yeah.
And that was going to be an event where if you took the time to go down to Cape Town where was it?
It's in South Africa.
So that's like
huge travel.
Is Cape Town? It's called Cape Town. Is it in Cape Town?
Yes, Cape Town is the city.
The city. Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I've always been horrible with geography.
I got you.
So like if you were going to go down there, because not that many great athletes are going to take the time to go all the way down there.
Yeah.
But if you win it, you go to the games. That's the way
But you have to win it.
But you have to win. So Carol Ann looked at the field probably and was like, I'm going to do the qualifier. I'm going to try to go to this, win it, and get my ticket to the games. It's probably going to be the easiest one I can get to. Or not get to, but get
that was
through
when
to the CrossFit
you
games.
had to win. You had to get first.
Yeah, first sanction to get the whole, if you're not familiar with the system last year.
It was completely messed up.
Or 2 years ago, whenever it was. So, but it was very clear that you had to do the qualifier.
Yeah.
So like Carol Ann crushes everybody in the qualifier. Like probably will win this. And then it gets announced on Instagram that Katrin is going to Cape Town.
And she had to this point had not done
a
sanctioned event.
So
she had not punched her ticket to the game.
So basically Carol Ann is now up against Katrin for this spot.
And unlike Katrin, Carol Ann's having to pay pretty much out of pocket.
And she's had to do the qualifier, and like that just is a blatant that they do not follow their own rules. Yeah. It's just like, oh, Katrin wants to come and she has this many followers and it's going to bring more like notoriety to our, because this sport is it turned into this like profit
Yeah.
making,
you're
private business, like competitive thing.
You're leaving out an important part of that story. And that is, as soon as, so Katrin announces like, I'm going to Cape Town. Yay. You know, like she does. So Carol Ann makes the decision to pull the plug, to not go, to save the money.
She thinks probably not going to be Katrin.
And so then,
or at least I don't want to risk going all the way there and not getting a ticket.
Exactly.
It's not worth it.
So, so Carol Ann decides not to go. Katrin goes. And then while Katrin's in South Africa preparing for Cape Town, she announces, I've decided not to compete. So now just the simple act of inviting Katrin ruins Carol Ann's season.
Potentially.
Yeah. I mean, it ended up being irrelevant, I think, but
I think she ended up getting through the Open or something.
Yeah, she got in.
She's a fine athlete. She did just fine, but
it was very
it was
irritating.
more the fact that like they just totally blatantly ignored their own stipulations.
Yeah.
I totally see where the sanctional owner is coming from. It's like, you know, it's a business.
Yep.
And it's not like they're not allowed to do that, but it's so poor for the sport.
Yeah, because it just takes an athlete being like, nah, I don't want to do your qualifier. And now the sanctioned event owner has to decide, like, is it more important that I stick to my, like, morals and I put my flag in the ground about this qualifier, or do I invite the athlete that's going to bring in all the fans and, like, increase my revenue?
Yeah.
Like, you're going to invite the athlete.
I guess all my point in bringing this up is to say, what is it going to be like when the CrossFit Games has their qualifying process, but then these other individual events with their own prize purses exist?
Yeah.
And with their own rules and their own qualifying procedures and things like that, and their own there's going to be a lot more money in those events. I wonder what's going to end up happening with the CrossFit Games.
Yeah.
Or with those events in their own right. So it's going to be super fun and interesting to watch.
What do you think? Like, if it was up to you, Alex Parker, head decision maker of the CrossFit Games, what does an ideal season format look like to you?
Honestly, I think something like this works really well. I think they did a really good job at going back. I don't think anyone should qualify out of the Open. I like the fact that they have 2 online qualifiers now to kind of weed out the field. I think quarterfinals should be a smaller field. And then I think semifinals should be the way that they are, but with the seeding process that you described to make that a little bit more fair and it's like random, but not. You know, it's random. It ends up being random.
Well, no one is good enough to manipulate their finishing position in
no one is going to do that.
No, it's just, that's not a gamble.
I think what has happened this year has been very fair. You know, besides the fact that like some of the events had to be online, which is inherently unfair, because different environments and things like that. I mean, you can't argue against the fact that somebody like Emily Rolfe and Pat Vellner, who get to compete against each other, isn't at an advantage when like Brent Fikowski is on his own in the garage. I mean, you can probably like figure out a way to make your environment different, but it's harder for others if you don't have the training partners in the vicinity. Yeah. But also, I just need to say one thing. Brent Fikowski in that Gretel workout.
Oh my God.
Okay, I was looking at because I wasn't following along with Alice, really. I was just looking at the leaderboard, and I was like, Brent's out. I think I said it. I was like, Brent's out. He was like an 8th or something. Yeah. And then he was in, and I was like, what? And then I saw his...
on Gretel, which is like a short person workout.
And Meredith was like, just watch it. And I'm like, okay, for starters, it looks hilarious.
Who knew giraffes could move so fast?
Yeah. But like, the way he moved the barbell for those clean and jerks, it was like a beginner almost.
He didn't touch his chest.
No, it was just like, it basically went from the ground. It was like a snatch, but like still meeting the requirements of a clean and jerk. Yeah. I was really impressed.
Yeah.
Wow. What a comeback. And also his coach is one of my best friends. So I'm really happy for both of them.
Yeah. You can just hear Dave in the background in that video.
I know what happened. I guarantee you it was just like Dave just didn't let him give up. And it was like, you can do this, man. Yeah. And like, that's amazing.
He gave one of his like Dave Spur pep talks.
And like the meme from CrossFit Games after with him like coming out of the fire.
Oh, the Undertaker meme? Yeah. The video where he's like comes back from the dead. Yeah. That's such a classic like WWE thing and such a like perfect utilization.
It was perfect. I was just a big fan of that whole And Brent he's a nice guy and he deserves to be there.
I'm excited to we're going to FaceTime Dave soon, and I'm excited to ask him about the weekend because, like, I just want to I want to know what happened. I want to hear all of it.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I think it's cool. Sometimes I get lost in thought about this sport and like what it could be and all the options about where it can go. Cause it's still like in its infancy, I think. And it's, I think the leadership.
It's got some growing pains.
Yeah. But
it's growing.
The leadership now is much better.
Yeah.
And I think that, the people making the decisions and working, they really do care. And like, I get to see that a little bit. And so it's made me care a lot more and not just be, super, super critical. There's still obviously things and people to criticize, and that's okay.
It's funny. Like Meredith is on the athlete advisory council.
Yeah.
So she has meetings and it's like there's a NDA. So I'm not involved in it, but I'll always be like, you should tell them this. Tell them this is my feedback.
Like,
you should bring this up at the meeting. I'll
definitely make sure to do that, Alex.
You should tell them that they need new commentators.
Yeah.
I'm sure all of that gets relayed back, right?
Definitely. Honey? Yeah, for sure.
I do have a question though.
Okay.
Personal question. Does any part of you, or did any part of you while watching semis make you miss competing and wish you were kind of still in the mix and competing?
I mean, I would be lying if I said there was part of me that wishes I could do, like, was that good. I could do that. Especially when I see events and I'm like, oh, I would love that event. I would do well in that event. Like, and it's one of the best parts about regionals was, it was the people, it was getting to hang out with your friends. Like, testing yourself. Like we train all year, and it's like, I always loved the test of regionals, and I always loved like the format and, the chip timers and the way that the arena feels and everyone's watching. And it brought a lot of that back, especially seeing people, on the floor who I've spent my career competing against. And then I did Gretel.
with Lindsay.
And I was like, yeah, no.
We also should mention that Lindsay was doing Atlas at her home gym here in Calgary, and she needed somebody to push her doing Gretel, and Meredith opted to.
Well, we asked Lindsay.
And Lindsay actually ended up absolutely demolishing that workout.
Well, like we'll do the whole story about Lindsay. We asked her like the week before, what do you like? Do you need anything from us? How can we support you? Because she's our friend and she's our coach, and we're super proud of her. And I think she was like, I need someone to do Gretel against me.
Well, I think originally she was like, I need someone to do all the workouts with me, and we were like, yeah, no.
Anything else? Pick something else. But Gretel is a good one to do it against someone just because it's so fast. And
you can waste time feeling sorry for yourself, as Lindsay put it.
Oh, 100%. There's a lot of time.
It hurts at the end.
Oh, yeah.
But you can keep moving.
So we decided between me and Alex that it would be me.
I know I decided that.
You decided that. Yeah, I don't remember that being a conversation, actually. I just remember you saying, oh, you're doing Gretel with Lindsay.
Yeah.
I was like, pardon me? I haven't done anything under 10 minutes in like 3 months. But yeah, it was fun. It was. I don't it was really painful.
Yeah.
I just kind of decided.
Didn't implode until about round 7.
It was actually, 8 was the implosion, but like, I was kind of deciding like, what do I want to do? Like, what's my strategy? And then I was like, well, this isn't about me. So then it became, what can I do to make Lindsay go the fast and like get the best score possible? And so the answer to that, unfortunately for me, is you have to go as fast as you can on the first 5 rounds.
Yeah. There is no strategy in Gretel for people who want to compete.
Yeah. And so regardless of what happens there, like I know Lindsay can see me. She was right behind me. Like she's going to try to keep up even if I'm going at a completely irresponsible pace for me. And that's what I did. And then
but Lindsay has the fitness and the incentive for the last 3 rounds to put pedal to the metal when you inevitably fall off pace.
Yeah. So I basically got it around 7.5, and I was just like, leave me behind. And that's where Like
And
my
she
wheels.
did, unapologetically so.
Oh, it worked great. I think she PR'd by like 30 seconds
Yeah,
or
she
something.
really
34 seconds.
did really well.
And ended up finishing well. I'm not taking any credit for that. That was all her, but
Meredith gets in the car after. She's like, looks at me. She's like, still got it.
Still got it. I remember I was like, because I could hear our barbells and I was just like a rep ahead.
Yeah.
And I could hear Greg counting. And then there was one I just bobbled the clean. And then I heard click right before mine. And I was like, damn it. She's got me. Because she was behind me. I couldn't see her.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was really fun. It's I miss the feeling of competing. I don't wish that I was doing it, if that makes any sense at all.
I really miss regionals. I even miss like so usually you check in the day before, so Thursday.
Yeah.
And even that, like seeing your friends, like seeing people you haven't seen all season. Like, I'm not gonna I don't want to be name dropping, but like I like seeing like China Cho and these girls that are, and like Jen Smith, like all these people who are just like, I really enjoy just being, they're just awesome. Time, and I miss even those parts. Or like there's a lot of girls who don't compete anymore that I think back to, and I'm like, we had such good times.
Do you remember?
We'd go for dinner after, and
I love
it's probably a little bit less social and more intense
more competitive now for sure. I remember 2018 at the wet, like it's fun, like check-in day is really fun, but there's always like an inevitable amount of peacocking going on. Like
everyone wears a sleeveless shirt.
Like you're strutting around, you're like checking out the number, you're like, oh, 204, you think you're hot shit. I had 201 that year. I don't know if you remember. I was number one.
I don't
know why I was number one. I wasn't number one. I just got like the number. I got the 201 number. But then, so like that's going on, right? You're like, you wear your best CrossFit, non-CrossFit clothes. You're wearing like, you got your backpack, you got like, all the bullshit.
I mean, I didn't do that, but
yeah. But what you did do in 2018 was they had the handstand walk mats out to practice.
This was like nobody had actually been on a real one. They were all makeshift in practice.
The first year they came out, so everyone's using wooden ones or like ones with like plates. And then, so they had them out so you could practice. And Alex Barker, right in front of everyone in check-in, kicks up to try the handstand mat. And just like Jerry of the Day scorpions, this shit. And like
face plant, like I scratched my chin.
I was like, okay, Alex, that is not.
That was fine. I walked it off.
How you do that. It
made me extremely nervous for the event.
As it would probably anyone.
That was a pretty big crash.
I remember like I was trying to warm up for that event, but also you were having a mental breakdown. So I'm like, oh, okay, I have to like talk you through the handstand walk mat while also trying to like prepare myself. That was fun. Yeah,
I think I look at people. So West Coast Classic. I'm like, I do wish I was there. I do. But then I actually think about what it would be like if I were there, and I'm like, I don't know. It's so stressful and it's a lot. Like it comes at a cost.
Yeah.
And sitting and watching is really fun too, and cheering my friends on. There was a lot of emotion, I guess, but
yeah, a lot of different
it was cool.
Conflicting feelings.
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah. I don't know, it's a good question, but also like we're going to go mountain biking this weekend and not think twice about it, which is the best part for me right now of not competing, is I don't just question all of the things that I do or that I don't do. I don't just question like my actions as much. I just do what I feel like doing. And if I skip a workout to go biking, then I skip a workout to go biking. Like that's my life right now. And I like it. Yeah. So I don't know. It's fun. I'm excited. Like, I'm excited for the games. I'm excited for next season to see what happens when all these events come back. I'm excited to see how the teenagers do. I'm excited to see, like, is anyone going to knock Tia off this year?
I think we've said this, not on the podcast, but in the privacy of our own home, because we talk about, these really interesting things all the time. But this sport is going to be a young sport.
Oh, soon, yeah.
These young athletes are going to they're going to start taking over.
I'd give it maybe like in the next 3 to 4 years, you'll see the average age for competitive female. I don't know about the men, but the females, you're going to see that age.
What I can't wait to see is like, what is the longevity of the sport going to be for these younger athletes?
I don't know that we even know that for like adult athletes.
I don't think we do, because we haven't seen, the sport has changed so much in like the careers of, I mean, okay, you look at some of the events from West Coast Classic and you compare the results.
Yeah.
That snatch ladder, not that many people finished.
No.
Almost everybody finished this year.
Yeah.
Not almost everyone, but a much, much, much higher percentage.
Yeah.
But like you look at 2015 regionals, like a lot of the max snatches were like 165.
Yeah.
That was considered a heavy snatch. Yeah. And now it's like 215 is like the heaviest.
Yeah.
200 for girls is kind of like, 190 is kind of getting to be a standard.
Yeah.
So like you look at, let's just take for example China Cho.
Yeah.
You look at her in her or Annie Thorisdottir in her like first few years in CrossFit. She's only snatching like 135 as a max for several years.
Yeah.
Now they're snatching upwards. Maybe not China, but like Annie, she's in the mix. She's probably
got a 190.
Yeah. But now you're looking at athletes who at the beginning of their careers are snatching 190, 200. So it's
Mal
like
O'Brien,
what is the longevity of the sport going to be when you're snatching that much that early?
Yeah.
In your career? And how long can that last? I don't know.
Like, are the kids going to make it to 30 years old and still be competing
and snatching that? Like,
I mean, I don't think so, but like, I'm not sure that I don't know if it's going to be physical or if it's like going to be burnout, because that's a long time to do a sport.
It's also worth mentioning, like CrossFit doesn't really have an off season.
No.
And you're seeing now these older athletes like Carol Ann, for example, she put out something on Instagram, was like, guys, like I know all of you who didn't qualify for the games this year, that you're hungry and you want to get back to the gym and start training. But I'm trying to tell you, to help you, if there's anything I can say, it's this: take an off season.
Yeah.
Give your body time to recuperate. Give your mind time to recuperate. Because in there's no, like, I look at ski racing and there's a very distinct off season, and that's summer. You go to summer camps and things like that.
Well,
and
every sport is like that.
Every sport. CrossFit, nothing. There's summer competitions. You just jump right back into training. Everyone does it. You don't want to fall behind, so you do it. It's really the only thing a lot of these people have is being in the gym, and they enjoy it. But that's going to take a toll, I think.
It's going to limit your longevity and progression.
Mm-hmm. So we'll see if that ends up becoming a thing too.
Yeah.
It's just super interesting to talk about the sport. I really love it.
Yeah. It's so interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the people are interesting, and the varying backgrounds of people and who's up and coming. And I'm not like a CrossFit nerd. I probably don't even know half the stuff that's out there, but from what I can see and the people that I know,
the days of people moving to CrossFit from other sports are going away.
Okay, but what about the guy who won?
Jason Hopper
at MAC,
the Clemson wide receiver.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but I don't think you're like that. You're not going to see that very often. That's going to stop happening.
That was interesting to see, because last year at the games, I remember Dave said it, I think on social media. He was like, who's the guy who came like third?
Justin
Medeiros. They said Justin Medeiros is good at CrossFit because he's done CrossFit for a really long time. Didn't play any other sports. It's like been CrossFit. CrossFit made Justin good at CrossFit. And so that's fair. And that's the argument for a lot of these young teenage girls. But this other guy, even Dallin Pepper, he was another like he played baseball.
Yeah.
And then just decided to go for CrossFit. So you can, like, I think on the men's side, you're still going to get athletes who are just very, very, very athletic. Just to put more evidence behind your theory that CrossFit is a low skill sport.
Yes. But I mean, like, that's my favorite theory. I will die on that hill. Especially when you see a wide receiver, just like, he's been doing CrossFit since 2018, and he's like, let me just win MAC.
Yeah. It's funny, again, the announcers saying like, this guy, he's a newbie, or I don't even know what they said. It's like, why not say, like, what did they say at one point?
It was something like rookie. They implied that he was having rookie luck, I think. I'm like, no, this guy is an absolute stud athlete. It's what you should be saying.
Like, the fact that he's like take his athletic history and like actually explain what he's done and how this parlays into what he's doing on the field right
like
now.
what does Division I strength and conditioning look like at Clemson University?
And
It
just
looks like
sheer
a lot.
athleticism as on a D1 football team.
Yep. The only fact they seemed to know was that Clemson lost to Alabama. And
That's
he played
what
in
it
the
was.
game.
That's what it was.
And I'm like, you can't come up with a better fact. Like, it was like the only thing that anyone knew was like, well, yeah, Clemson played Alabama in the national championship and they lost. And that's all they could remember. Mm-hmm. I was like, this is pathetic.
Not that I know anything about football, but
you're like, yeah, Clemson. The Clemson Lions.
Anyways, this was not supposed to be the topic of the podcast at all.
This was supposed to be the intro to the podcast, but here we are.
That happened again.
But yep.
I guess if people aren't interested in CrossFit, they just skip right over.
Like boring. I think this was an entertaining one though.
We're gonna write a tell-all book.
I can't wait for the tell-all books to start coming out. I want to know everything.
I don't even know that much.
Yeah, I mean ours would be medium interesting because we know so little. But there's one coming that's gonna blow the doors off, I bet.
Okay, you know what's one interesting fact that I'll divulge? Dave Castro is basically keto.
Oh, for sure.
Do people know that?
I don't think like
so.
People probably think that like it wouldn't surprise anyone that he's like a paleo follower.
Yeah,
but he is a straight meat
paleo?
eater. Tequila.
Okay. Whiskey is not.
And also Dave is an absolute gem.
He is. He actually is. Like just like people would love to hear about that, I bet. We'd have some things we could tell people.
Yeah. He's great. Cool. Well, this was a long one. So if you've made it to this point, kudos. Thank you. We appreciate it. If you liked it, share it, subscribe. You'll get notifications when new ones go up because we don't always put it on social media. But thanks for listening. We appreciate you, and we will do this again super soon.